Welcome to Adapted, the podcast where we explore adaptations of various forms. I'm today's host, Tom, and with me is
Patrick.
Patrick. It's
Yeah, I
it's
went with
nice to
Patrick
meet
this
you.
week. Yeah,
Yes, it's a new
there are people who call
co-host.
me that. There are people who call me that.
Yeah, okay. All right. Well, Patty G, was our former host. We had Pat for a little while, I think. I think I remember him. And now we have Patrick. So a more mature, grounded individual. I'm excited to talk to you about this picture because today we'll be discussing American Prometheus from 2005 and its adaptation, Oppenheimer, from 2023. So, American Prometheus, the biography, the 700 plus page biography of J. Robert Oppenheimer, was written by Kai Bird and Martin J. Sherwin over a period of about 25 years, and it won the Pulitzer in 2006. Sherwin had started this work in 1979 and conducted something over 100 interviews, resulting in about 50,000 pages of documents. And starting in 1979, a lot of these people were still alive, so he was actually able to talk to them in person. He really couldn't put the material into a coherent thing that other humans could read. And so once it became a complete disaster and he ate through his advance, he finally contacted his friend Kai Bird to help put the material into some sort of book form. The book itself, as reviewers have noted, is not really interested in the details of physics or bombs or anything like that, but it really is focused on the man and the character of Oppenheimer, who is as impressive as he is strange. The film has been itself dancing around Hollywood for about 15 years. A lot of people had wanted to adapt this. Eventually, it was the actor James Woods who introduced the material to Christopher Nolan's producer, Charles Roven. Early, Robert Pattinson had given Nolan a collection of speeches by Oppenheimer, and Nolan was apparently really drawn to them because he thought he saw in them Oppenheimer's hesitancy about using the bomb, which is interesting because this book insists he had no hesitancy whatsoever.
Yeah, that's numerous times said that he
Yes,
didn't have it.
yeah, but Nolan saw that apparently. Warner Brothers was going to produce the film, but insisted on a streaming service release. They wanted to do a streaming service and a theatrical release simultaneously. Nolan hated this, and there was a famous break between his former employers, Warner Brothers and Christopher Nolan. He broke
Does
with
Warner
them.
Brothers have a streaming service? Just totally on side.
Oh,
Do
I
they
don't know.
have a streaming service?
I think they wanted to do it with Max, with HBO Max. They were going to
Oh,
partner
do
with
they own it?
them.
Okay, yeah, I was like, I
I
didn't
don't know
know
if
if they
they
had
own
one.
it, but they were gonna do it through Max.
Okay,
However,
that's
if
fine. I
they
was just
own it
curious
or
because I'm like,
partner with
wait, do
them.
they have one? Because there's so many. I didn't know if they had one. So
Yeah, yeah. But Nolan is a big advocate of traditional film, traditional release styles.
I kind of agree with him. I think it's, this is so this, the particular topic here was sort of like, where are we going? And this was like the blockbuster comes back to Hollywood. We haven't
Mhm,
had, we had the Avengers was probably the last really big blockbuster, but that was
mhm.
before the pandemic, right?
Yeah.
And so, this is like, hey, we're coming back. Here's the
Mhm.
big thing. And I kind of agree with him. It's nice to see these things return to the theaters. So,
Yeah, oh, I do. And what ended up happening was he ended up partnering with Universal to get it done. They agreed to it. They also agreed to like they wouldn't release any other movie within 90 days or something of this. Um, they promised they would be in theaters exclusively for either 90 or 120 days. But what also happened was within that same month, Warner Brothers released Barbie. And while initially there was this kind of fear that they're going to compete with each other and eat each other, basically theaters went, oh, we can make a double feature out of this. And it really was a sort of somewhat bubbly but honest revival of the excitement of going to see a new movie on Saturday night.
yeah, I was glad to see it. Like when this I didn't see it in the theater because I have children and never leave the house. But it was a cool. I'm like, this is cool. Like it's nice to see people excited about the movies again.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. And it was an exciting time. It doesn't seem like there was this great revival that followed it, but this was only 2023. We're only talking in 2024 now. We're having a new Oscar season either begun or will begin very shortly, as it is December. So
What
maybe
was the
something
one
will
they were
pick up.
calling Wicked and the other? Was it like It or it was Gladiator and Wicked?
Oh, I
What they
didn't. I
what they calling it something? Glick
Gicked,
Glicked? I don't remember. I thought they were
Gicked,
trying to make Gladiator and
Glicked.
Wicked into
Hmm.
something, and people were trying to mix them together. I'm like,
Oh,
no, it's not working. But I'm pretty
yeah,
sure they were trying to at
yeah.
least make Gladiator
Keep
and
it
Wicked a
going.
thing. So there was this attempt to basically be like, let's find two movies to pair
Hmm.
during these time periods and make them a thing. So
Yeah,
I don't know if it worked as well. Wicked certainly was selling tickets, but I don't know if it worked as well, and so was Gladiator. But there's at least buzz around movies in a way that it felt like there hasn't been for a while, other than franchise films. Like, I mean, I guess Gladiator's kind of a franchise film, but other than for like the Avengers or for Star Wars
superhero
or
movies
superhero
or
movies or Star Wars or those kind
mhm,
of things where
things
it felt
Disney
like,
owns. Yeah.
yeah. So it was just nice to see, hey, this is a new material that's, actually getting people excited to go to the theaters.
Yeah. And it has this kind of, I mean, I have troubles with this movie and we'll get into that, but it does have this sort of old school feel about it. Like, here's an important prestige picture that you can think about and digest and all that type of thing. Now, I don't think there's very much
I
to
don't
think
think there's
about in
much to
this
think about.
movie, but it is performing that very well. And I think people gravitated to that sort of energy. And hopefully that will get people to make better movies that are prestige pictures. But I think you're right. Like a blockbuster that was a prestige picture is really cool. This was the third highest grossing movie of 2023, Barbie being the first one. Who is the second one? Oh, that's an interesting question.
No idea.
No idea. We'll have to look that
I
up.
can't think of what movie would have
It
been.
might have been the oh God, what's it called? The other Wizard of Oz movie. It's about the wizard who
There was
goes to.
another Wizard of Oz movie?
There was. It's about the wizard as a young person discovering Oz. That was a
Oh,
big hit this
yeah.
year.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it didn't have the kind of residency this one,
I just would
but
have assumed it was either Barbie or Oppenheimer.
yeah, that was it was Barbie was one, Oppenheimer was three, but we'll have to look up who two was. Though it might have even been a Marvel movie, whatever. In either case, let's start with the book, and especially with what I found really fascinating about the book, which was the character of Oppenheimer, who has to be the weirdest person,
He's a
one of the weirdest persons
really
I've ever read.
weird person I've ever, and I mean, I feel like I've read, you and I have read a lot of books. He is strange. Like, I read the biography of James Joyce, and that dude's weird, but nowhere close to this dude. Nowhere close.
Yeah, it seems like what I got out of it was he had obviously incredible intellectual ability, but also this incredible mercurial personality, so that he just couldn't settle on anything. And so you get this guy who was really, really interested in a lot of things, but he never goes to Nobel Prize winning territory because he just can't stay interested in a problem long enough to go deep, deep, deep into it. He can solve a lot of things. He can make advances. He can be incredibly impressive. But then he just jumps to another thing. And you even see that in his relationships with women, where he's just going back and forth between these two women, his wife and this other woman he has an affair with and continues to have an affair with, and then his one of his friends' wives as well. It just seems like he has trouble with this, with sort of grasping or grabbing onto anything, and that's even with his political commitments, which sort of
Yeah,
kind of go all over
he
the
never
place.
really wanted to, at least the book seems to suggest he never wanted to be tied down to any specific thing. He prized freedom and flexibility, and he had the wealth to do it. That's what it suggests. And he had the wealth and sort of the egotistical personality, just this sense of, I don't have to commit to anything. I can have whatever I want. There was just this sense of entitlement, I guess, that sort of went with him, that the movie doesn't quite get. And the book really hammers that certainly he knew he was wealthy and he had no problems spending. and he had no problem sort of just alienating people left, right, and center. And he knew it too. It's not as if it's sort of like, I remember like, John Nash or somebody there sometimes, like you watch the movie of John Nash, it's like suggested like, oh, he didn't know he was bothering people and annoying them. It's like, no, the book makes it clear Oppenheimer knew he was annoying these people and knew that it ticked them off, and he seems to have thought it was kind of funny, or he just didn't care that he was ticking them off. So there's just so many stories in there that you just read and go, if I knew this man, I would never go near him. He's out of his mind. You never knew what he was going to do. It sounds like my thing is he reminds me of Falstaff in the sense that like Falstaff is said to be, he's so mirthful. He just brings out mirth and wit in others. Like just being around him makes you wittier. And Oppenheimer seems to have been that for like intellectuals. He wasn't like necessarily the brightest guy in the room, but he just inspired other people's intelligence. He just knew how to, in some ways, he was like a really good teacher more than anything. He just knew how to ask people the right questions, how to get people to do the right things. He was it seems he was very charismatic. He seems to have just had a personality that people just really wanted to please him. They wanted to show him how smart they were. And so he really brought out the best. That's what I mean by Falstaff in the sense that not that he was comical or any of the other things, just that he brings out certain characteristics in people that they have, but he accentuates. And that's what he strikes me as, and that strikes me as what his particular brilliance was. And yeah, the book kind of makes the case, and the movie, I don't. The book says it wasn't really known how big a deal it was until the 70s. The movie seems to kind of bring it to the fore a little more. The only piece of really original research that he did was on black holes. He kind of wrote the first theoretical papers on black holes, apparently. He didn't call them black holes. He didn't know what they were. And people kind of read it and went, nah, whatever, and kind of moved on. They didn't, it was all just seemed like just this milieu of physics advances. And then later, when they started really looking for black holes, suddenly people went and said, Oppenheimer wrote about that in the 30s. And suddenly he sort of pops back up as for his actual work. But his published work doesn't seem like it was that big a deal.
I don't get the impression it was, or it wasn't the most important in any field. It makes a point very early on in his career. I think he published something like 20 plus papers in a
Papers, yeah,
year,
at one point, but
which
in
is
totally different topics.
on a bunch of different topics, which first of all is incredibly impressive.
Yeah.
That you do that in a year, but also doing it on this diversity of topics, it shows his intellectual agility, but it also probably indicates that you're not really chewing over a topic for as long as it might deserve. Right? Like if he stayed on one topic and wrote, let's say, 7 papers that year, but on a single topic and spent more time with that, maybe he would have had more success simply for his work and not as this bridge between the political world, the public world, and the scientific world, which is his
But I
great
mean, I
accomplishment.
imagine I don't know whether the case, it doesn't really get into the papers that much that he was publishing, but I imagine that there were plenty of other physicists out there who read those 20 papers and went, oh, I can do something with
Yes,
that. And
exactly.
so he generates all
Mhm.
this stuff and he just kind of generates it all out there and lets other people do the work essentially and
Mhm.
get the prizes for it. He just sets these groundworks. So, yeah, totally. He doesn't ever get a ton of recognition for that, it seems, even though he's brilliant and publishing all this great stuff. He just doesn't ever pursue any of it to effect or for personal effect.
Yeah. And I think the book makes that clear that he opens the door for a lot of things. And I think your point of what makes him a great teacher is that he inspires people. He's really good at inspiring people. He's really good at seeing the core of a problem almost immediately, regardless of what topic the problem is on, and being able to articulate what that problem is. He might not do the most groundbreaking work on that problem, but if you have a discussion group, it seems like he's the guy who can say what the problem is in the most clear language so that other people can have at it. And the book makes that clear plenty of times. And it also seems to be the reason why, and this is completely absent in the movie, but it seems to be the reason why Grove, the eventual general, hires him as the head of the Manhattan Project. Because remember that in that section, Grove's like, yeah, Lawrence, who's another physicist, played by Josh Hartnett in the movie, Lawrence is brilliant, but he's very hardworking. Oppenheimer's a genius. He seems to know everything about everything. And so Grove has this kind of instinct, and we see that in that section of Oppenheimer can hear problems from a bunch of different sectors and kind of coordinate them and inspire people who are working in those sectors. So his particular genius is good at that. Even though he's not the most organized guy and he's probably not a great like manager in the traditional sense, he's very good manager of intellectuals because he can jump from discussion to discussion and create a kind of choreography between them. So that's very compelling and it's very interesting. There's also other things he's pretty impressive with. His ability to learn Dutch in 6 weeks.
Yeah, he learns languages incredibly easily, apparently. Um, he learns languages. He does, even just his like outdoor skills are really interesting because you can kind of see him just being a guy who just sits at home and smokes. He apparently smoked like 3 or 4 packs of cigarettes a day. You can just see that kind of guy just sitting at home, and he drinks a lot. So you can kind of see a person like that just sitting at home, like basically I do. I don't smoke, but anymore. But it's like I'm not gonna go and ride horses through canyons in New Mexico. I was in New Mexico a couple of years ago driving actually way off road. And I remember thinking, I'm like, I hope this car does not break down because there is nothing here for miles and miles and miles and miles and miles. And there's huge canyons and all this stuff. It's a really beautiful place, but and I assume it was way more off-road then. But this guy is like out there camping, riding his horses, going through the snow. Like he actually really was a cowboy kind of thing.
Mhm.
He just even just his outdoor just ability to sort of blend there, this sort of chameleon quality that he could just go from thing to thing to thing. But then he'd go from thing to thing to thing and then be really weird about part of it. Just do
Oh,
weird stuff
yeah.
while he was there.
Yeah.
The movie kind of makes it be like he had a few incidents like the Apple incident. And it's like, yeah, the Apple incident, which apparently there's doubts even whether that totally happened. It seems to have happened, but there's not 100% certainty on it. But it makes it just be like, but he got over that. It's like, my gosh, no, he didn't. It's just
Yeah.
like,
The Apple incident, you guys remember it from the movie if you saw it. In the book, it's somewhat similar. He injects possibly arsenic into his tutor's apple because he's so tired of practical physics and lab work that he just wants to kill this tutor. Now in the movie, he almost kills Niels Bohr apparently, which is an invention of the film. But yeah, that's a good example. The other one, my favorite one was when he's in the train car as a young man, and there's a woman there, and he try in the train car with him, and he tries to kiss her, and when it doesn't work, he feels really sad and falls down on his knees before her and starts crying and apologizing. And then later he sees her in the train station and tries to drop his suitcase on her for some reason. And there's
yeah,
doubts as to
that's
whether that happened, but that's weird. That's a weird thing to do, or a weird few things to do. And you get the sense that sometimes the programming didn't work, like
yeah, I think he just
the
is.
algorithm failed in certain instances. Like you get like this, he's such a brain that it just clocked out at certain points.
Yeah, and they make the point that just certain situations, and again, the movie kind of gets at this. The only real time it seems to affect him badly is with Truman, and they try to make it about the bomb, but he does seem to have done things like that a lot, where he would just get in a room and his brain would kind of shut down, and he would say just weird things and people wouldn't know how to interpret that. Like he just seems to there was numerous incidents I remember in there where they just said he would just he'd say like the worst possible thing that you could say in circumstances, and people would not know how to react to him.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, the Truman thing was, this is in the movie. I feel I have blood on my hands. And it's the worst possible. He's trying to advocate that they don't use the H bomb, they don't develop the super. But basically he's saying we shouldn't have made the A bomb. That's what it sounds like, which is
Yeah, it's what it
Truman's
sounds like.
great accomplishment, right? You know, as a president, he ended the war, and that's not the thing. Whatever you think about the A bomb, that's
You
not the
don't
thing you
say that
say.
to the
That
man who just used it.
yeah,
You
especially if you
don't.
want something from him. Um,
Yeah, it's not. Yeah, that's not the it's not the right time for that. And so it was just a weird moment of self-indulgence that he sort of seems to have had at that point. But he seems to have had a lot of those, I guess, in the book.
yeah,
That's the suggestion with him. And again, though, I think it is a good book. I have issues.
yeah, I want to hear about that.
My biggest issue with it is that there's a weird sleight of hand argument that's going on, and I didn't know how it was composed, so I have a feeling this is part of that. That there's a weird sleight of hand going on where there's a couple quotes during his security clearance hearing. Like it all feels like it's the book kind of builds up. It's like all about kind of informing the security clearance hearing. Like he kind of not all about that, but that's a frame. Like a lot of the, when things come up in the book, they'll be like, and then when this came up in the security clearance, they kind of keep using that as a jump forward point. Um, and so they a number of the scientists said when the security clearance was going on and afterwards they make the claim that he's a modern Galileo. And the book makes that explicit in the introduction too. They claim that he's a modern Galileo who was persecuted for his beliefs. I'm like, yeah, there's a problem with and this is why I find it a little bit annoying because they're Galileo is persecuted or prosecuted, whichever direction you want to take it in, for his scientific theory, which was correct, and he was forced to recant his scientific theory despite its correctness. Oppenheimer isn't persecuted for his scientific theory. He's persecuted, he's celebrated for that. He's persecuted because of his both his political leanings and his just quirky, weird things where he just pissed people off, sometimes intentionally. And so what you're doing is you're basically you're saying, well, he's almost above complaint. He's sort of above suspicion here to something. Like they acknowledge he's weirdness. They acknowledge the fact that part of the reason he was there was because he ticked people off. They acknowledge the fact that he part of the reason he went through that security clearance was because he opposed the super. Like they give all those sort of things, but then they pull that sleight of hand. They basically go and say, but he's like Galileo. It's like, but he's not. He wasn't person. What the theory, the analogy that came to my head, it would be if like Isaac Newton invented a new kind of catapult, and that catapult was used against the French in the 100 years not the 100 years war in like the War of Spanish Succession, and it was really devastating. And Newton went to the court and said, "Please don't use this catapult that I invented." And they said, "No, you're going to get kicked out of the court." And they sent him away. And whatever, it would be like, well, he's that would be what it would be like. Newton's not being persecuted for his no one's saying gravity, his theories of gravity are wrong. They're saying, no, we can use your theories however we want. That's not what happened with Galileo. So it bugs me that they do that sleight of hand there because they're trying to give it a sacrosanctness to him that he doesn't actually possess. I'm not saying that he's wrong about some of his theories about strategic arms limitation and this kind of stuff, but it's not the same. He's not infallible. He's not obviously right on that point.
Yes, I look back over the Galileo comparisons. You're right that he's not a modern Galileo for those reasons you articulated. I got a feeling though from reading it that the Galileo comparison is just not that well thought out. It's just
That's what I mean. But they keep
he's a
saying it.
prosecuted like a famous scientist who's prosecuted is always going to be compared to Galileo, just in terms
I
and
guess so, but
yeah.
but I feel like they're trying to do it to justify to say what that they're trying to use it as sort of an argument that his unique position on arms races is therefore correct.
Well,
That's what I feel like they're
I
trying to do.
think the one time where you actually hear the author's voice or the author's voices, whatever you want to, however you want to call it, is at one point I think they do say, like the question really isn't is he right or wrong, but should somebody be or is communism right or wrong? They're talking about his communist phase, but should somebody be persecuted for their beliefs at all? You know,
Yeah.
for their any kind of beliefs, which I think is the point they're kind of trying to drive home. I think the problem that you're pointing out is um, that the fact that he's being persecuted for his his ideas about the H bomb and about his political beliefs um, don't mean that he's above criticism, which is what the book kind of wants to posit, is that he is a sort of martyr for a
Yeah.
good cause.
And I
Um,
guess that's my problem is he's not a good martyr for a good cause because he was kind of an ass. Like
yeah, he's a
some of
rough
this is
guy. Hmm.
but my favorite is like the straws thing. It's like he insults straws over and over again. At one point he won't even let straws buy a house in Princeton because he's just vindictive. He's just kind of mean periodically, which you don't get in the movie really at all. They just make him into a total
It doesn't work at all in the movie. The one
no,
scene
they
where
did
he's mean, you don't see it. You just see it in like flashback. You can't even figure out what's going on in it. But anyway,
which one? Einstein scene?
no, the scene where he's being mean to Straws in the conference, where they're buying the material from Norway,
Oh,
and
that one. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And
yeah,
there's no context for it. Yeah.
there's no context. You have no idea what's going on. You're just told like, here Straws is embarrassed, and then you see Oppenheimer say something about a shovel, which if you read the book you'd understand, but the movie doesn't tell you anything. But anyway, please keep going.
Yeah, no, I think that's it. It's just it's not. I think it's a good book. I have issues with the way they're trying to play a sleight of hand game. They're trying to raise him up as a martyr. They're trying to place him beyond. They're trying to make him sort of not infallible, but they're trying to sort of make him beyond criticism per se. Not entirely. And again, it's like I'm not saying this correctly because it's not that they do place the criticisms out there. They make it clear what his faults were, but they're still trying to say but we shouldn't, what happened to him shouldn't have happened. And sometimes I kind of listen, I'm like, sometimes it feels like it should have though, because he was, you can understand why someone might have been really angry with him and why a lot of people really didn't like how he treated them and how he talked down to them and how he demeaned them. And you can see why people would get angry about that. And you can see why some people, when they hear the Chevalier incident, sort of gets a little bit, there was a lot more permutations of the story that he told over the years, enough that during a time when you've got a guy, his associations, his story here keeps changing, there's something weird going on. There's enough there that a person might say, maybe you shouldn't have this job. Like maybe you should take a little time away. Like you could understand why it could have happened. And I don't think that's what was really going on, but I think they need to spend a little more time on that rather than just kind of playing this he's
Yeah,
above criticism game.
and this thing, the book shortcuts this. The movie actually doesn't, but somebody actually did spy at Los Alamos and kick
Yeah,
the Russians
the
the
Russians
bomb.
did. They
That
did take
happened.
stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah, it did.
yeah. So when you go like, no, he's not. He's clearly not a traitor, but maybe he's a little too lax on security. The best
He
evidence for that
was.
is that he was.
He was.
That did
This is
happen.
where I'm like, but he did do these things. And the argument could, even with the argument with the super, the argument was like, well, we shouldn't have done it. We should have been better, and we should have just done strategic arms treaties and this kind of stuff. And I maybe that would have worked. Maybe it wouldn't. Maybe it would have led to Western Europe being overrun by H-bomb wielding Soviets. Like there's no proof that just because it didn't happen doesn't mean it wouldn't have happened. So it's a weird it's a really complicated argument with no definitive answer. But here there seems to be this argument that if only Oppenheimer had been listened to, we could have avoided all of these problems. And that's where the sleight of hand is he was right. Like Galileo was right. He was right. We should have done that, and we missed our opportunity. And I agree, maybe there should have been more attempts at that, and I don't think Truman, of all people, was particularly even-handed. And so there are certainly arguments that on that front, but that doesn't mean that he's 100% right, like Galileo was right. It's not the sun, the Earth going around the sun. This is a little more complicated
It's a
than
little more
that.
complicated. I do think I'm sympathetic with the book in terms of he was treated quite poorly by these
Yes.
people. The proceeding was entirely unfair. It was incredibly vindictive, which yes, he's vindictive to Straw in a lot of ways. He's not that vindictive. Straw
No,
really
no,
buries
I
him in a
agree.
way
It's
that
a
like
lot worse. It
it's
is
a
a lot
lot
worse.
worse. And a lot of it is trying to make him look like a communist when, he like had some friends in the 30s and he spoke at some student union things and he did give some money to the communists, but it was for this like the Spanish
Yeah,
Republicans.
supposedly for the Spanish Republicans. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I
It's
guess it's
just
just
not that
a
impressive what
no.
evil he is. What I thought the movie was going to do, and I thought the movie was going to improve upon this, was I thought the movie was going to make Straw a little more even-handed and worried, like, hey, the Russians actually have a bomb, and they have a bomb because you were lax with security, which is what
Yeah,
happened, right?
which is true.
Which is true, but then at the end it turns into a
Usual
mel
suspects.
into the
It's usual
usual
suspects.
suspects, and he
When I
turns
saw
into
the
like a
ending, I went,
mel.
"It's the usual suspects." It's him being like, "And you just, and then you gave them the." I'm like, "Of course he did. How did we? No, were people when they saw this in the theaters
Did they
not
not know
knowing that
this?
this guy did this? How could you not?"
Yeah, but that's where the book where I was sympathetic to the book, and what I also
And
like
I
about
did
the
like the book. I do
yeah.
want to be clear. I just didn't like that particular aspect of it. I found it quite well written. I found it really engaging. I just found a little frustration in the attempts of not quite hagiography, but there's an attempt here to make him out to be something more than he was, I think. And I don't th I just that kind of bugged me a little bit, but I still think it's a very good book. I think it's well worth the time.
It is. It's well with the time. It's well researched. I do think they bring in a lot of his for a book that can get a little hagiographic. They bring in a lot of his weaknesses, and they show him as a deeply flawed and deeply weird guy who,
No, they do, but that's why I wish they had just done that and not
yeah,
tried to make him a modern Galileo.
yeah, which is, I mean, books. I still think the Galileo comparison is just famous scientist persecuted. I think that's as
Maybe
deep
I'm
as they
following the
were
logic too
going.
far. Maybe I'm
Yeah,
following the logic too
I
far,
think
but
it's
okay.
this is my thing with historians. I think historians are probably of the different academic disciplines, they're probably the best writers and probably some of the worst theorists. They're really good at compiling a tremendous amount of information and synthesizing it into a clear narrative. That seems to be what historians do. But when it comes to
That's why
developing,
so many of them, that's why medieval historians make such good spies. They
oh,
used to recruit them. They used to recruit them in like the 40s and the 50s. There's a number of medieval because they basically were like they're really good at taking not great information, but being able to put it all together and try to see how they fits and make a narrative out of it. So they used to kind of try to use them for
oh,
that purpose. Yeah,
I
there's
did
a
not
number
know
of them
that.
in like yeah, there's a number of them in the Cold War.
Oh, very interesting. Um, but I feel like English people, ironically enough, are actually pretty bad writers, but they tend to worry more about their theories. And, my thing is like philosophers, I think, are just writing science fiction at this point. I have no idea what's going on in their
Yeah.
imagined worlds. But I think that this book falls into that trap. They're not really thinking through their theory. My personal belief is they're not thinking through their theory well enough.
Fair
They're
enough.
they're just synthesizing data. They are really upset with how this guy was treated. They think, he did this heroic thing and then he was treated harshly. I think they wish that he was more guilt-ridden about the bomb or guilt-ridden at all about the bomb. I get the sense that with the author's sensibilities, that if he was a little off about the bomb, they would have liked him more. That they're a little, but they're honest about that. They say pretty clearly, never felt
It
any
didn't.
guilt.
Yeah, he never. And even I think they specifically say he expressed the opposite because there was that play. There's some play that gets made, I think in France. It's like a French play, I think. I can't remember. Somewhere in Europe from the transcripts of the hearing, and they make a play of it. And it's, courtroom drama kind of play. And then apparently it ended with a fairly long monologue by the Oppenheimer character expressing his regret at having invented the bomb. And apparently Oppenheimer liked the play, but he didn't like that. He basically said, I really don't like that ending because that is I don't think that way. I don't believe that. And it really bothers me that they have a character my character say that.
He almost sued them. He
Yeah,
prepared. He
so
was going to
it's
sue
like,
them for it.
yeah,
So yeah.
he was not, he basically like, if you're like, I'm willing to go into a court of law and say I was happy to drop the bomb just to get people to stop saying the opposite, I don't think he had many qualms, or at least he at that point didn't want at a minimum at that point in his life he didn't want to admit them.
Mhm. Yeah, maybe he never wanted to admit them. He also just strikes me as the type of person who wouldn't. Like he just doesn't strike me as a person who carried a lot of guilt. There's people who
No,
who are kind of guilt ridden. I mean, there's that bizarre scene in Los Alamos in the book, which they really, really gloss over in the movie. It's there, but they gloss over it, where he attempts to give up his daughter because he says,
yeah.
"I don't think I can love her."
He goes to them and says, "Can you take the child?" And basically says, "Can you adopt them? She seems to like you more." Is it the daughter or was it the son? Is it the daughter? I think.
Oh, okay, it's the
I
daughter.
can't
I
remember
thought
which
it
it
was the
is.
daughter, but
Maybe it's the daughter.
I think it's
And says,
it's the reverse one in the movie. I know it's the
"Yeah, I think
different.
okay, yeah, you're right. So I think it is the daughter." But yeah, he goes to them and says, do you want to just adopt her? I just don't think we can love her. Can you
Yeah,
take her?"
it's
And they're like,
weird.
they basically like, "What are you talking about? This is a weird thing to say to people who are babysitting your child." Like it's he has these weird moments, and they kind of do that in the movie, and they have him say, "I'm a selfish and horrible person." A selfish and horrible person doesn't say they're a selfish and horrible person. I'm like, yeah, they do. It's not that hard. They could do it pretty easily and still be a selfish and
Well,
horrible
yeah.
person.
In the movie, though, first of all, in the movie, he never says, "I don't think I can love her." That gets cut. And you also get the impression in the movie he's just really tired. He has a
Yeah,
newborn at home and he's really tired and he kind of says something stupid and he's like he regrets it. In the book, I
it's a
I
big
believe
thing.
him. I
Yeah,
believe.
he's a big thing. He really tries to get them to take the child and adopt their child after he's left it, because I think it was they left like Los Alamos for like 6 months, and he comes back. He's like, "You want to just keep it?" It was just like it's really weird.
Mhm.
I
And
think he would. Yeah,
he treats his son pretty poorly too. Like they go on vacation and they just leave his son at boarding school because they're like, I don't think Peter would like this, or that would be a kind of a pain. And his wife, Kitty, doesn't like their son. So
oh
that
yeah,
becomes
it's
a
pretty
big
clear. Yeah,
problem that the wife just she doesn't like her son. And so he's constantly having to pick between his wife and his son. And he seems to pick his wife more frequently than his son.
yeah, they make that pretty clear that he does. Yeah, I mean, and I guess this is so. I guess we're on to the movie now. Like my one of my biggest complaints of the movie is what we're talking about right now. Is I know I think you didn't like it at all. I wasn't. I'm not going to watch it again, but I didn't hate it. It's not like didn't irritate me fundamentally like Out of Africa or something like that, or Forrest Gump. I just think it's just not as there's not that much, and I really didn't like how Murphy portrays Oppenheimer. I have no sense of his charisma, like
Yeah.
zero.
Mhm.
He does not. I don't know why they kind of do it. This is what I feel like was going on. There's sort of this accretion of characteristics you're sort of supposed to see him demonstrate. It's as if Nolan remembered that he was supposed to show, not tell. So he would just show you the character display a particular characteristic and then never show it again. So you would see him have a scene where he's like really charismatic, and he does something really charismatic in the when he's teaching, and he does the thing with the black holes, and he gets a student to write a paper and they work really well together. So you get to see that. Or we get to see him be really weird with the Apple thing. So you get to kind of see these things, or like the paranoia. In the book, he's really paranoid. He's constantly being phone tapped. He finds like microphones and behind paintings in his office all the time. He's constantly finding this stuff, but it's like, no, no, no. We'll just show you one time some people going through his garbage, and therefore now you know that he's paranoid. So they just sort of layer on these things, and it becomes an exercise in you just sort of recognizing the accretions as demonstrated rather than an actual dynamic portrayal of characters.
It's really hard.
For him
Yeah,
particularly.
for Murphy does some things well. He does the voice well. He does a
Yes.
really good physical embodiment
Hmm.
of the character. It's a really distinct character, but Murphy does this thing that actors do that drive me crazy is he's always sort of staring into the distance, which is supposed to be like deep thought or whatnot, but what it ends up happening is it blocks me from whatever he's thinking about at any given time. So I don't know what this guy, how I don't know who this guy is. I mean, he really is an absence at the center of this movie. We get that he's a womanizer, I guess, because he has a girlfriend when he has a wife. And like you're saying, like there's the charismatic scene, and then we're done with that.
And then we're done with that. And then
Yeah,
there's he can be really sweet and romantic, but then we're done with that.
yeah,
And then it's just like, and he can be really weird, but we'll kind of see that. And he can be really torn about the bomb, but then we're kind of not gonna do that much more with that. It's this accretion of characteristics.
yeah, and it seems like the story Nolan wants to tell through Murphy is that it's about a guy who's seeking to become a martyr to be forgiven for the bomb, which is entirely invented by Nolan and
Yeah,
his screenwriters and by Murphy. That seems to be the thing they're
I think
suggesting.
Nolan wrote the screenplay.
Yeah. Did he write it alone? Oh, maybe he
I
wrote it
don't know.
alone. I
Maybe
don't
he
know. I
did.
thought he wrote it with somebody, but
He probably did.
regardless, the writers of of Oppenheimer and Murphy, that seems to be the big idea, and we get no sense of really who this guy was other than like kind of twitchy. He apparently pisses people off, but we don't get those scenes, or we get them very very slightly.
You get them, but he's sort of like charismatic when he does it. He's
Mhm.
not, it's like he's kind of funny with his shovel and his beer bottle thing.
Yeah, but
He's
we don't know
not
what's
he's
going on in that scene.
No, but I think we're supposed to laugh. We're
Yeah,
supposed to get that people are laughing and he's just being clever and the guy's like, and this again is in the book is the like did I do a good job? Maybe too good of a job.
yeah, yeah,
They that is in the book. And so it's like, okay, we get it. It's almost he irritates people because he's so good. It's his quality that bothers people. I'm like, there's a little bit of that. There's also he was kind of a vindictive jerk.
yeah.
And he
Could
could
be.
do nice things. I particularly like he's when he not really good friends with Einstein, but they apparently would talk a lot. And he knew Einstein loved the New York Philharmonic, so he actually secretly had a radio antenna installed on the roof of Einstein's building, so Einstein could have like the tallest radio antenna in town in Princeton and pick up live broadcasts from the Philharmonic. Like he would just do nice things. So it's not like he was just a total jerk, but he kind of was sometimes. That bothered people.
Yeah, but I mean, he also would then describe Einstein as he's a monument, not a light.
Yeah.
So in public, so
And yeah.
yeah,
So
yeah,
it's just so he would say nice things, that he would do nice things, and then he would say really mean things.
yeah. You get none of that from this character. All you really get, the only thing I really get of his internal state is guilt about the bomb,
Yeah.
which
And that's mostly just him kind of crying a little bit and some shaky camera work when he talks to
and
Truman.
and yeah, and then the stepping on the dead body, that scene. Remember
Oh,
that?
yeah,
That's
yeah.
really bad.
That's really bad.
But these are the things like I
I
have
forgot
no
about that.
idea why he's interested in Kitty, why he picks
No.
Kitty over Jean.
Well, the implication is he sort of just picks her because she chose him and got herself knocked up. That's what the movie seems to suggest. I don't think that's what the book suggests,
Mhm,
but the movie suggests that that's why.
mhm. Oh, okay. Is that I didn't even
Yeah,
get
they
that.
say that very specifically. They
Oh,
say like, "Oh, she spent no time locking you up."
mhm.
Like she did that on
Oh,
purpose.
okay. Yeah,
I
that
think
she got
Tatlock
pregnant
says
on.
that. I think
She
Gene
says
Tatlock
that. I
says
didn't
that.
realize it was about pregnancy. I thought it was about like
No, I
about
think it's
him
supposed to
in.
be like that's how she locked you up by doing that. That was what I thought was going on. They do
Oh,
a lot of disservice to the women, the female characters.
that's another big problem with this is
That bugged me.
Kitty. When you read the book, I think Kitty is probably the most interesting character outside of Oppenheimer.
Yeah, I would go with that
She's
too.
really smart. I mean, she's a graduate student in botany. She was deeply interested in the Spanish cause and married a number of men who were involved with that. One who was killed doing that. She was.
And killed for really sad reasons. He was killed because he was wealthy and everybody looked down on him and thought he was basically just a guy there for thrills and they wouldn't he was made an officer, I think, and no one would listen to him. And so he basically on the very first combat they saw was like, I'm gonna go show that I'm really here and I'm not just here for thrills. and gets killed immediately. Like you're just like, oh, gosh, that is really sad. Like this guy was actually like a pretty decent person and got himself killed immediately in an attempt to prove his loyalty, like or prove his kind of creds. So you kind of feel, yeah. I mean, that, again, it's full of that's I really like. I like those kind of stories that the book tells. Like that, really, I found that really sad and really moving. And yeah, she's really interesting. She's a really and she's the movie just kind of is like she is an alcoholic. I mean, yeah, so is he by the sounds of it. The fact that like they tell so many stories about how he made really good martinis and really strong ones, and everyone would go over there and he'd be drunk by like 6 o'clock because he would just be plying everyone with martinis. So she seems to have had more of a problem, but they make it sound like she's just, carrying around flasks everywhere and doing this kind of stuff. And it's like, yeah, I don't think that's not quite the impression that I got from her. I think she clearly had a problem, but I don't think that was, they just make her that. Like, and it becomes she's an alcoholic, and that is a threat to him. It becomes a nuisance to Oppenheimer that she's a drunk, and then when they're at the hearing, they see the alcohol there, and now that's a threat to him. They make her just sort of a albatross around his neck kind of thing. I
Kind
just I
of. I mean, she also does give the best testimony in the
This
end.
is true eventually, but that's sort of her
And
salvation moment. That's
she,
her moment
yeah, because
of
she does it for him.
because
She
she does
helps
it for
him.
him. Yeah,
Mhm.
that's her rise. That's her moment when she gets to kind of be what you don't expect her to do because she struggled the whole time. She couldn't raise the kids. She's drinking and he's crying, the baby's crying and she's just drunk at the table. Like she the whole time she's just been an impediment
Yeah,
almost.
I mean, there's a few things that they give her. So when Jean dies, she's the one who's like, "Sorry, you committed the sin. You can't wallow in it. Get yourself together," which is
This
exactly
is
what he
true.
needs to hear.
This is true.
She's the one who suspects. I know there's no explanation for this, but she's the one who tells everyone, "Listen, it's Straw. It's not anyone else. He's the one doing it," and she's right about this. Now, I have no idea how she knows that, or why she thinks that, or why, if she's able to suspect that in the way any intelligent person would, why this is a complete mystery to
To
everyone else in the
everybody
room.
else. Yeah.
But so she, I think there's a little bit. I think the disservice to her is in the fact that yes, she's just there as to orbit Oppenheimer.
Yeah.
But I think it's also the things that I found most interesting about her was how people would often go, "Man, she is just a bitch." I never talk
Oh
about people
yeah, they
this
all
way.
say that. Yeah, they
They
say
say
that
she
so
was
many times in the
just a
book.
bitch, like all the time. Different people were constantly going like, "I've never said this about anyone, but listen, this woman is."
Is horrible.
Yeah.
Like what was it? What was the island that they lived on at the end of their Saint was
Oh,
it Saint Thomas or something like
yeah,
that?
something around there. I don't
Something
remember the.
down there, and yeah, it's one of the Caribbean islands. And so like half the island hated her.
Hmm.
Half the island was like, this lady is awful. Like there aren't a lot of people that I know of that I would just be like, that person is terrible, and everybody would agree with me. There's so many people really disliked her.
Yeah, and that I thought would be, man, what a interesting character. Like if you can play that and make that character sympathetic, which the book does.
Yeah,
The
you
book
do
make
feel bad for
you
her.
feel
Yeah,
bad for her. She's in a kind of a bad spot. She loves her husband, but he's kind of a douche. She had these things she wanted to do, and now she's not doing them. She's not a botanist. She's not a revolutionary. That she wanted to do when she's young, and now she's just raising kids who she doesn't seem to like very much. And I
no.
thought, wow, this is a fascinating person. And there's just nothing. There's no note about her botany studies. There's no note. She doesn't even seem cruel to people, which, would have been interesting at least. Be like, why is this woman hated? Like to have to capture that and also make her sympathetic, that's such a great challenge. I would think like of all the characters, if gender was pushed aside, that would be the character I would want to play because it seems like the greatest
Yeah.
challenge. And then with Jean,
Jean is also really interesting in the book.
she's really interesting. She's like she has these mental health problems. Obviously, she commits suicide, but
Maybe.
maybe, oh my God, in the movie that,
The movie, they had the hand. Oh, wow.
yeah,
Wait
they
a
have
sec.
the,
Joe, what a
yeah.
subtle moment there.
And what the and why what is the movie saying? Who killed her?
What I thought was they
What
would,
are they trying to
well,
say? Like
I know,
who would bother to kill her in the circumstance of the
in the
movie?
circumstances of the movie, there's no explanation
There's no
whatsoever.
explanation.
In real life, we should just mention in the book, they do talk fairly at length about how There were, I don't know if they were CIA or NSA or FBI. There were a few murders that were committed by government agents in a somewhat similar manner, where they would get somebody basically high on barbiturates or whatever, one of those things that makes you fall asleep, and then drown them in their own bathtub. So it was a way in which they did kill people. And the theory was that maybe the concern was that either Jean Tatlock was a spy or that she was leading Oppenheimer away from the project and that they needed him there, so they killed her off. There doesn't seem to be much evidence other than that, but it seems possible. Whereas the movie just had the hand thing. What I thought was supposed to be the suggestion was that that was in Oppenheimer's head and he thought maybe someone had murdered her, but I
I
don't
don't,
know.
yeah.
There's
There's no
no
real context to
real
that one.
reason for why he would think that or why anyone would do so,
Mm.
other than maybe Kitty, but I don't think they're definitely not suggesting
Suggesting
that.
kitty.
But it's
Yeah.
sort of it's the only thing. But she's fascinating because yeah, she has these mental health issues. She apparently was a very accomplished
Accomplished doctor. She's an MD, right?
physician. Yeah, not a physician. I think she's a psychiatrist, but she's a doctor. She's a medical doctor. She's a psychiatrist. She apparently was one of the first major, I think she was the first female, they say it, like so whatever
At
hospital she
Stanford.
was at. Yeah, Stanford, I think, Stanford Hospital. She had like these incredible accomplishments and sort of, intellectual pedigree. And yet she just seems to have just had so many problems and was just plagued by them. And she had this really weird relationship with him. But it's just like she just becomes she's just kind of constantly naked standing around Oppenheimer. Like, why do they just,
I
why did you
think
do
I think
this?
it's one of the few performances where a main character is more often naked than clothed.
No, yeah, I don't think
You
you
know,
very rarely see her with
I
clothing
think like
on.
there's like two scenes where she has clothes on, and there's plenty of scenes where she's naked. Even in scenes she is not in, she is
Just
naked. And
the fantastic. Okay,
oh,
so we
we
mentioned
have
this
to talk
before
about
we
this.
mentioned
Yeah.
this at the end of last episode. I mean I laughed because I just with the scene when they're having the in the security clearance hearing or whatever, and suddenly she sees, or what's his Kitty sees them having sex and and I'm just like, well, I looked away and then I looked back and in my head I went, oh, because this movie, which is one of my complaints of I don't think there are very few scenes that are longer than say 45 seconds. It is constantly shifting. And I think that's just because the bulk of material he had to get through, or maybe he thought the material was too boring and he needed the frenetic pace. But man, does it never settle. So I thought I missed the scene and I thought, wow, that was a really short scene. I'm like, when did we go back? And then I went, why is Kitty there? I'm like, oh, we're still in the same. Oh, oh, this is great. Like, this is.
I
And then
had this.
I just laughed. I really laughed. I went, they just were like, we gotta get her tits out one more time. That's literally what I thought. I thought this is just because they wanted to make money on this movie. Why did they keep doing this to this? Why do they keep doing this?
So yeah, to poor Florence Pugh.
Yeah, this
Yeah,
poor. I mean, she's very
actor.
attractive, but why do you keep making her naked in the scenes? There's
Yeah.
no reason for her to do this.
It's one of these things, and the same thing happened to me. I looked away, and I came back, and she was just wrapped over him,
Over him
like a,
as Kitty smolders,
yeah,
stares
like a,
smoldering.
yeah, like a scarf or something like that. She's wrapped around him. That reminded me of the Bjork goose dress. Bjork wore a dress of like a goose with a goose head over her shoulder. I'm like, oh, it's the Bjork goose dress. They're going for that. But I looked away and I looked back and went, oh, we're in a new scene. Oh, let me rewind it. That must have been. I wonder what was the button on that last scene that allowed it to cut. And I rewinded for whatever, 15 seconds. I'm like, oh, this is a choice. And it's one of these things where you're like, this is why we have editing rooms. You could look at that and go, oh yeah, this doesn't work at all. This sounded good in my head maybe, but clearly this is hilarious. I'm going to cut this. And they didn't cut it. They just kept it in there. Oh God, poor Florence Pugh. And then the other thing where
I actually liked her. I thought she was good. I thought
I,
she was fine. I
mm,
thought she kind of gets that a little. Again, with what they did to the character, I thought she was interesting at least.
The character is nothing. I mean, she has nothing. I'm not the biggest fan of her. I've seen her in a few
I've never
things.
seen her in anything. I just
Yeah,
thought it was interesting. I kind of got the sense of like, this is a very, very depressed person. And this is a person that, yeah, you leaving her is going to end badly. I guess that was just and I think that's the only function she serves.
yeah.
And I,
We don't know what she does. We don't know what her interests are, other than she doesn't like flowers. You know.
and she's Jungian. She's Jungian.
Well, she mentioned. I don't even know if she says she's a Jungian. She just says, "Oh, you know, young."
Well, I think he says something like, "Oh, are you a
Or
Freudian?"
you
She
only, or
says
do you only have books on Freud?
Freud, and I thought she says, yeah, something like that. And she says, I'm a Jung. I thought she said she was Jungian, or he says, oh, you must be Jungian, and then she's impressed that
Oh,
he knows who Jung. I
who?
thung.
Okay, maybe that's how it is. Yeah. Okay,
Yeah,
she's a
and again,
Jungian
and
of
that's why
something.
it's like so many of these scenes are just there to be like, hey, we told you, now we're moving on. That information was communicated. It's the same thing with the botany. I think the botany thing is mentioned very briefly that Kitty is a botanist and studying botany because I think she says something like, "Can you explain physics to me as though because I'm always with my head in the flowers as a botanist." It's like literally one of those kind of things. And then okay, we have added that layer to our character. Now we will move. Don't forget it.
Move on, move
Don't
on, move on.
forget. Moving on.
It doesn't matter at all, but yeah.
Move down, move down, move down. It's like next scene.
Yeah. The scene where she talks about her history too, it's in like it's like a minute. Right? They're on the horses, she explains her whole history, they kiss, then he has to break up with Jean and then he has a baby. You know, it's yeah, the pace is incredibly fast for a movie about a guy who's basically writing on a chalkboard for 3 decades. You know, that
That's why I do. I mean, I kind of think that I don't know whether that's because they felt they had to get through a lot of material or whether they worried it was a little boring. And so they would just move really quickly.
I think the bigger problem though with the movie is the straw stuff. I think that doesn't work at all. As much as I like Robert Downey Jr. in that role,
He's the best. He's the best
he's the
performer.
best part of it. Having the movie end with the great victory being that he doesn't get to go to the Department of Commerce doesn't make sense in a movie about Oppenheimer. The big victory or redemption of Oppenheimer should be the JFK giving him the Medal of Freedom, right? That's an afterthought. The big thing, the big
Because they're
comeuppance,
only doing that because they're giving it to themselves or whatever that
yeah,
thing that
whatever
Einstein said.
Eisenstein, which is fine because then you can make the moment ironic. You have a traditional
This is true. Yeah,
still,
you could.
you
Yeah,
can make the
and
moment
then
ironic.
that actually could work. Yeah.
Instead, you have the big thing is like this guy
This is
who
this is a blockbuster, man. They gotta throw down the guy with the gauntlet and the
right, but
ring.
that's fine.
You know,
You can kill him off,
what
right?
is his
So to
name?
speak. Uh,
Thanos.
Thanos. Okay,
Is
I
it
was
Thanos?
thinking
Yeah, the
of
guy with the gauntlet and the
the
five.
Gauntlet. Yeah, I was when you
Yeah, that
said the
guy.
ring, I thought you were talking about
Well, that's true too. You got
yeah.
to do that one too. You know,
Mm.
you gotta have that moment
Yeah,
when
but
you
that's
throw down
fine.
the yeah.
But the whole movie builds to the trial. It's not really a trial, but the Senate confirmation hearing, right? We keep returning to that black and white thing throughout the film. So that's the thing that stitches it all together is this guy getting his comeuppance, which is really nothing to do with Oppenheimer. He doesn't do that. That just happens to
Well,
be
it's
something that
suggested that
happens.
it is by his friends. Like
Yeah.
Oppenheimer's friends all get together and they, even though he has decided he's going to be the martyr and be tar and feathered, they're going to stand up for him.
Yeah. And it wasn't even his friend, it was somebody who he actually had a disagreement with, but
But
came
he's so
together.
inspiring.
Yep, that they're, whatever. I don't think that worked. I don't think
No.
that worked. I think if you're gonna have a movie about Oppenheimer, making the climax about another guy doing something that's kind of not related to Oppenheimer, where he's not in the scene, doesn't really work. I think that if you had moved to him accepting the thing and the redemption from JFK, but realizing I can't actually accept this in the way that Einstein described, right? You're doing it for other people. You're being redeemed so that your family is happier now, right? They feel better. You have to let them feel better. Then his problems with his family can be resolved. He can kind of settle down. He can be redeemed. He can get over this martyr complex. All that stuff works. Instead, it's just you don't even see Kennedy in that scene, I don't think. You see
No, I don't
him
think you
like
do.
briefly in the Oval Office and voiceovers are talking. That
I
doesn't
guess
work.
there's just I didn't even I mean maybe because it was just so long. By the time you got to that, I mean I knew what was going to happen and I just didn't care. And I'm not, and I don't mean that. I guess it's just like it felt like so anticlimactic. Like it didn't. It felt like it felt like thought it needed to build to that ending, but that ending, I don't know. It just didn't. I wouldn't have found either ending particularly convincing
Yeah.
personally, because I never really bought most of his personal conflict anyway.
Mhm.
So even the idea of we're gonna rehabilitate him, like he didn't really seem that bothered by it in the first place.
Yeah, and that's another problem.
So.
And I think it's a problem also with the book too, which is what is he actually losing? Right? I don't think that's he's not losing the Princeton job, right? He's just
He
losing his
stayed on at the Princeton job even
yeah,
for a
he's
while
just
afterwards. Yeah.
losing his ability to give advice, which he was losing the next day anyway. So he's losing his reputation, which matters, obviously. But um
But it never seemed like it bothered him. I mean, again, even in the book and the movie, he sort of seems like he was ready to step away anyway. And yeah, I think there's a certain level of frustration and burnout, and he's angry, but at the same time, he just kind of seemed to have gone back to Princeton, and then he lived on the island for a while and enjoyed the weather.
yeah, and
It doesn't
pissed off
seem
his
as
neighbors.
Yeah, and I guess this was the thing that kind of bugged me about it to some extent too, is they make it seem, yeah, he had a huge, yeah, this was very disappointing to him, but th they compare it and they do again briefly mention it, but it's like some of his contemporaries who had went through similar things. One of the guys literally went and was splitting railroad ties, and they have other guys who just they were teaching like high school physics. Like they lost everything. And the worst thing that happened to them was they say they're like, well, Frank had to sell one of his Monets.
It was one of
They
his Van
actually
Goghs.
one of his Van Goghs or whatever, Van Gogh or Monet, but it's like, I'm sorry, man. It's a little hard to feel bad for you when you're
Yeah,
like,
I well,
I got
yes
you got
and
one guy who's
no.
making 250 a day, and you get the other guy who's like, I had to sell my Van Gogh for $50,000. How will I ever survive? Like,
Yeah,
it's a
I,
little
it's a
hard to
li
feel 100% bad for the trust fund boys.
yeah, but at the same time, I mean, Frank's career was ruined for a long period. I mean,
Yeah,
that's unfair. That I think,
it's unfair, but with Oppenheimer, I guess Frank I felt worse for. But Oppenheimer, it just feels like it doesn't feel like his career was ruined. It
no, at
feels like he'd
all.
already kind of checked out.
And he
And
should
so,
have gone back to physics. That's the impression too I got was like, stop being this public boy, stop being, stop being famous. He likes being famous, and a lot. I forget which physicist tells him this in the book. It's kind of like you got to go back to work. You got to go back to actually doing science again. And that's the tension. The other tension is you have to stop the hydrogen bomb. So there's these two kind of contentions going on. But I think, ultimately, like, yeah, he probably should have gone back to doing physics. Once he lost Truman, he could go back and give speeches here and there, anti-war speeches or anti-nuclear armament speeches, but he's losing his security clearance. Even if he doesn't go through that trial, his security clearance evaporates the next day. He must have known it wasn't going to be renewed, regardless of the hearing. So he should have probably gone back to physics. And I think the book suggests that. You don't really get that in the movie. You don't get the movie at all, actually. But yeah, so it's harder. I did feel bad for Frank, despite the fact
I
that
did feel
I had to
bad for Frank,
sell
but
his
again,
Van Gogh.
there's
But
just a little bit like I do feel a little bad you feel bad for the guy. Like he is unfairly persecuted. But it's just a little hard to feel bad for the guy compared to what others had to
yeah, what
go
others
through.
went through. Yeah.
You've got one guy out there splitting railroad ties and one guy having to sell one of his Van Goghs.
Fair enough.
Like
Is
there's
it?
just this little bit of a difference. One of them had a lot more space to fall
Well,
before
yeah.
he hit the bottom.
Mhm. Yeah. So I mean, I think that's fine. I think that's fair.
Yeah, and that's and they but this is more just kind of criticisms not of the film or the movie or anything else. This is just kind of
General things. Yeah.
general conversations on history.
Mhm.
Um but the I
I think also like I'm getting back to my biggest problem with the movie was straws, even though it's my favorite part of it. The what he's vindictive about doesn't neither either it doesn't make sense or it's not covered right. So there seems to be two things he's vindictive about. One is this meeting where Oppenheimer laughs at him, which we don't know what the meeting's about. They don't cover it.
I mean,
Um,
they mention it's about isotopes to Norway, but
but we don't get the scene though, right? If the whole movie is this guy hates this guy because he humiliated him, wouldn't you want to see that scene? Like, wouldn't that be an engine of some sort?
I guess probably the way they were thinking is it's not enough of a reason, so we'll just again, this is the we told you, we showed
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
We showed it to you. Why
Stop
what's your problem,
complaining. Here
Tom?
it is.
Tom,
Yeah.
what's your problem? We showed you
Mhm.
what his problem was.
Yeah.
This is so I
You
guess you're
sound like a
right.
student contesting a grade on a paper.
Yeah, it's
That's
like I showed you this.
yeah, yeah.
Why are you complaining? I showed you why he's mad. I
Yeah.
showed you. And
And
he's
then
mad
the
about and he's
and the
mad because he made Einstein mad at him. We showed you that, right? Did you see
and
that scene? Let
but
me
the
let me let
that
me show let me
scene,
show it to you again and
yeah,
again and again so you'll remember.
in color now. And that scene also pissed me off because the Einstein scene, for that to be a long-standing feud or the source of a long-standing feud, it's not in the book, and it makes no sense. Well, it doesn't matter if it's in the book or not. You can invent things. I don't care about that, but it makes no sense. Yes, he thought Einstein was mad at him because Oppenheimer said something. He continued to be Einstein's boss. Did he not have another conversation with Einstein that year or those several years? Was he like,
That's a
oh,
good point, yeah.
yeah, he's like he was still employing him. He never talked to him again. That was the end. And
I
so he
mean, I
just
guess
this
I don't know whether. I mean, they do again in the book. It is suggested that Einstein kind of just keeps to himself and never talks to practically
hmm,
anybody.
yeah,
So maybe that's justification.
except Girdle.
Yeah, but that poor guy. Which
Poor
again,
Girdle.
that's in the book too. That
Hmm.
is in the book, and you do feel bad for that guy. I actually get so this is we'll finish this talk, and then I actually do just want to talk about the thing I like about it. The only I remember when I had this one friend of mine who I met up with her and her husband. I happened to be in London at the time, and I met up with her and her husband, and it was just like at a bar once because they were like, "Oh, we're gonna go watch some soccer game." And I met up with them, and I'd only met him once before. I'd met him at their wedding. It's the only time I'd ever met them. And I had, but and then when we were sitting there, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this guy hates me. He he will barely speak to me. He seems really mad that I'm like crashing his honeymoon because they were here, and I'm like, I think he just wanted to be at this bar and watch this game. And now I showed up, and I'm like talking to them, and I'm like, I think he really, really hates me. And I thought it for years. And then I was, later on, apparently it turned out somehow it came up, and I didn't say that particularly, but they were like, "Oh yeah, that day he had the flu. He was so sick, and he had no eye." And I was like, and they go, "He was so sick, he was just like staring at the TV, but he felt so bad that you were there that he's like, I gotta go meet up with them." And I'm like, "Oh, I thought you hated me. Like, I thought this guy was like." Really don't like him. So
But
I
you
don't,
didn't
but you
see
could
him every day.
but I was gonna say that's
Yeah.
the only thing is like I hadn't seen him in years. Like they actually live in New Mexico. So I hadn't seen them in a very long time. So like I saw them in New Mexico and when they got married, and then I saw them in London and I hadn't seen them for years. And then COVID happened, so we really didn't see them. So when it came out maybe 4 years later, it was really funny. But yeah, I agree. There's no way he never unless it's just implied that he's so insecure because he thinks that Oppenheimer said one bad thing about him that he would never talk to Einstein again.
Yeah.
That
And
does not strike me as the
it
character of Strauss
yeah,
that he's that. I don't know.
yeah, that he's that insecure or what have you. But the whole movie turns on it, right? Like
Yeah,
this is the thing that inspires him. What I initially thought, and I think I texted you this when, about an hour or so into the movie, was, and this is inspired by the scene in which Strauss announces that they've discovered that the Russians have a bomb. They have evidence the Russians have a bomb. I thought what you're going to have was Strauss was going to be this guy who kind of goes about it in the wrong way, but has some justification being really scared of what Russia's going to
yeah.
do.
That's what
And
I mean. That is what was going
that
on.
that is what happened. So
That is what happened.
but I thought the movie was going to be a little more even-handed than the book. That's what
Yeah,
I thought
fair
was
enough. Yeah,
happening. Because when you see that scene, and he's like, oh, Oppenheimer says, we can't build a bomb. It'll be like starting the arms race. And he holds up the sheet and goes, this is the starting pistol. They fired the starting pistol. What are you talking about? Strauss is entirely right there. And when you
yes,
later learn that actually Oppenheimer let in the spy, and he allowed that to
yeah.
happen, Strauss is
They were
again right.
right.
They
Yeah,
were
he was
right.
Strauss was right.
And so I thought the thing was going to be like, yeah, Strauss is too aggressive, and he's, he does have a little private vindictiveness, but basically he has a point, even if he goes about it in the wrong way, and he goes about it too strong. He's too aggressive and he's too mean.
To straw.
Yes, thank you. Um, um, KJ, it's up to you to keep that or not.
Better not cut that.
Better not cut that. Okay, fair enough. But that's what I thought they were doing. And then you get, like you called it, the usual suspects ending, where
Yeah.
it turns out that
That was
I
why they were making him
engineered the
sympathetic.
whole
Yeah,
time.
yeah, exactly. Strauss was the man. His eyes are so sad. Like, it
And
was
then it
just,
ends with him going, he made Einstein not like me. I can't believe he made Einstein hate me. They were all against me. And he turns into this, like, cheerleader, like this schoolgirl cheerleader who's angry that the other cheerleaders don't like him. You're like, what the? How did this guy become incredibly wealthy and successful? And he's like this whiny little bitch man all of a sudden at the end there. I mean, it really was weird and it didn't make any sense, and it also just kind of ruins what is a really interesting dynamic, which is what if
Strauss is
Oppenheimer
Straw. Yeah,
what if
Strauss might have
Oppenheimer
been
isn't
right. Yeah,
entirely right? What if
yeah.
Strauss actually has a point, even if he goes about it in the wrong way? That's a harder reality to live with as an audience member. And it not only would it meet the facts more, it would be more dramatically interesting. I mean, that
I mean,
irritated me either way.
and that's I guess why I didn't really. I mean, I get your point. Now I understand what you're saying. I guess that's why I didn't really mind it because I didn't think it was particularly dramatically interesting anyway. It just struck me as it struck me as a storytelling technique, an obvious one, and there were so many obvious storytelling techniques throughout the whole thing. It just felt poorly constructed rather than yeah,
Yeah, it's also poorly constructed. We
yeah.
shouldn't deny that fact. It
Okay,
is,
I want to get into what I like about it though because
and I have some things I like too. Yeah, but go for it.
the thing I like about it, and this is I like most of the satellite characters. Most of the ancillary
They're
characters
great.
are great, really good. There's so many of them that are really fun. Even I really liked Casey Affleck. I don't know, I really like that. Just his you didn't like it?
He's a
I
little
liked
chewy. I think he's chewing a little bit, but
I mean, he's a little chewy. I don't know. I kind of just
mm,
liked the scene. I liked the way they kind of intercut it, and they just kind of have him just kind of like staring, little
mm,
ticks. I don't know.
yeah,
I liked that scene. I just thought that was, I liked that one. I thought that, I think Robert Downey Jr. is really
he's
good.
really good. Mhm.
He's really good. I thought Josh Hartnett was really good. I
Yeah,
actually
he's
really liked
great.
him.
Yeah.
I didn't like what they did with I Robbie, but I liked the portrayal. I don't know why I Robbie became, instead of being one of the most prominent physicists and the inventor of the MRI machines, and suddenly just becomes a Oppie. You gotta eat Oppie. Here's an orange. All he ever
he,
does is
he,
hand Oppenheimer food. It's like,
he becomes your Jewish uncle.
that's what he said. Because I was thinking, he just kind of sits there and he's like, "You gotta eat. If you don't eat, you're gonna become a skeleton. You're gonna slide in between the seats here, Robbie." And they just kind of, they really, like, they overdid. I actually liked the actor. I
Mhm.
thought the portrayal was good. If it was like his actual uncle, but instead it's a
It's
Nobel
yeah.
Prize winning physicist who
Mm.
uses some of the most medically and life-saving equipment we use still today,
Mhm.
and he just kind of becomes a sort of comic relief thing. I didn't like what they did to the character, or they didn't like what they did to him, but I liked the character. I liked a lot of those sort of ancillary characters. This is why I
Kenneth
think that
Branagh as Niels
oh,
Bohr.
Brandon's great. Yeah, I
He's
actually really
great.
liked him. I didn't even recognize him until he came back again. I really liked him. I just thought there was a.
Damon. I like Matt Damon and
I wasn't as big a fan of Matt
oh, okay.
Damon. If I like, let me rephrase. I liked his portrayal. I just didn't think it was the General Groves that I had sort of pictured from the book. The book kind of portrays him as like, I think he's like 6'4", like 250. He's just portrayed as this just mountain of a man who's just loud and shouty and just curses all the time. He steamrolls through things, and that's kind of there, but it's sort of just I don't know whether he felt like he needed to tone it down because Oppenheimer was so low that if he was doing that, it would have just come across as just cartoonish. Whereas
Yeah.
it seems like in the
You would have lost Oppenheimer's performance entirely. It
yeah,
would
and
just disappeared.
so
That's
I
a good
felt like
point.
he that's I honestly feel like Damon actually held back
Mhm.
because even picture the scene when they're on the train and they're talking about Colonel Pash,
Pash.
and they're talking about Colonel Pash, and he kind of has that the impression I got from that scene in the movie was that this man is like bellowing at him,
Mm,
just like and is this sort of just screaming at him like, "What the hell is wrong with you?"
mm.
And yeah, that's there, but it in the movie, but I just felt like Damon. I
He's
think
more
Damon,
explaining things in that
yeah,
scene than
then
chastising.
exploding, and that felt like a lot more what that man was supposed to be. But I really do feel like Damon actually felt like he had to hold back, or it would have completely overshown it. So. But I like the portrayal as it existed in the movie. I just don't think that's what it should have been. But there's so many of those ancillary characters around him were just really fun. I kind of liked them coming in and out. I liked even like the kind of smarmy security guy. I just kind of, I thought they were all more interesting. This is why I mentioned this. I said, I think it almost feels like Nolan is like a modern day Dickens. Like Dickens is very good. Dickens is really good at creating like what E.M. Forrester would call the flat characters. Those characters that are sort of, they don't, they're not round. He sort of creates contrast between flat characters and round characters. Round characters are those characters that they're sort of much more fleshed out. They have a lot more things going on with them. Flat characters are they're Mrs. Micawber. I will never leave Mr. Micawber. That is what she says, and that's what she does, and she never leaves Mr. Micawber. Mr. Micawber will always say something will always come around. Something always keep saying it, something always does come around. There's this sense that he creates a lot of these characters, and they often have like catchphrases or they do something. Madame Defarge is going to be knitting. She's always knitting. That's what she does. And she has a single-mindedness, and he's really good. I think Dickens is really good at creating those types of characters. I don't think he's as good at creating sort of really truly well-rounded, all these sort of like Pip isn't as interesting as everyone around Pip. David Copperfield isn't as interesting as everyone around David Copperfield. Nolan seems to do that here, which is that, or at least this movie does. He can't, he doesn't know how to create a really well-rounded character because he's just doing the same thing he does with a flat character, which is he's giving them some characteristic and then they run with that characteristic for the most part, and that's what they do almost every scene, and they're actually still interesting. But he does that with a well-rounded character. He just kind of adds a layer and a layer and a layer and a layer on them, and it doesn't actually make them rounded. It just makes them feel like a flat character with more characteristics. Not to say
Several
that
flat
Dickens,
characters collapse together.
yeah, into one, and I'm not saying Dickens does that, but I guess Dickens is best writing for Dickens, I think, are his flat characters. Those are his best. That's why I like Tale of Two Cities I really like because it's shorter and so many of them are really flat characters and they all just have these like one specific thing that they do and they do it really well. And so Tale of Two Cities I think works. And I really like that one. And that's why I just feel like it's going on with this movie. There's a lot of flat characters, really good, fun, well created flat characters. And his attempted round character doesn't work. But I like those other characters.
Hmm. Yeah,
Robert Downey Jr. is the best part. He's really good.
yeah. Robert Downey Jr. is the best part of this. Um, yeah, his yeah. He's hard to pick out. I knew who he was playing in this, but I didn't even recognize him
I
initially at
didn't recognize him.
first.
I
Yeah,
only knew it because I knew he played that character, but I didn't know. I would not have recognized him for a lot of it. I didn't recognize Josh Hartnett either. I kind of forgot
it
what he looked
took
like.
yeah, it took me a moment, but I was happy. He was great in it.
He's great. He's
He's
really good.
great, and he's not like known as being a. He's like a teen
Yeah.
bopper type guy. Like
When you
he's
first
like
said Joseph, I was thinking Joseph Gordon-Levitt. That's what I thought at first.
yeah.
And I remember thinking, I'm like, wait, that's Joseph Gordon-Levitt? I'm like, A, I would never have recognized him. And secondly, weird that you got two actors from 10 Things I Hate About You in the same movie
Yeah.
20 years later.
Reunion, yeah.
Yeah, I'm like, what? Think of all the movies you got two characters from that.
Mm, yeah. No, Josh Hartnett though, yeah, he really
Yeah,
he
great,
got
great
that kind of
performance from
like
Joker.
a really good distinction too with he's like very just American, like big and blonde and handsome and like doesn't
He
like
should be
these
a
unions.
quarterback or a running back.
Yeah,
Correct. Yeah, he's
exactly.
just
Yeah,
yeah.
he gets that character really well. I even think
He's
like
got a haircut you can set your watch to, as
yeah.
Grandpa Simpson would say. He just
Yeah. Um, yeah, and I like Tom Conti too, who was Einstein.
oh yeah, he's good
He
too.
was good in it too. He's not doing the like what I think a lot of people do with Einstein, which is this kind of crazy, really
Yeah,
fun
he's a
journey.
little, yeah, isn't he
He's a
funny? He's
little, I love,
smart people can be funny too,
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, he's not doing that at all.
yeah.
He's kind of sad. I actually
Mhm.
I liked that. I liked I don't know who plays Teller. I actually liked that guy.
Oh, did you Benny Safdie?
Yeah, I
Safdie,
kind
I think some I don't know how to say it. I thought that performance was really
you didn't like it. Oh, interesting.
I thought he was a little big.
I didn't mind it. I
Yeah.
guess I just wanted something. I was just desperate for anything. Maybe he
Mm,
colored my
yeah.
impression. I was just desperate for anything going on that wasn't either melodrama or just very boring.
Yeah. Yeah. It is kind of so I will say my favorite part of this, and I think the best thing about the movie outside of Downey Jr. is the Trinity sequence is
Hmm.
really good. And
That's really good. Yeah.
it's one of the sequences that isn't, as you said, 45 seconds long. They actually spend time on it. And it's also the one time where the music finally cuts out. I found the music. It won best score. Ooh, I didn't like it. It's just a lot of warbly, like 1960s music, like 1960s classical music. I was just everything was
Philip
always
Glass buys a loaf
well,
of bread.
yeah, yeah. But it's like lighter than Philip Glass. It isn't
Yeah, Philip
as
Glass actually is more. Philip
rich.
Glass has more going on than that. Yeah.
Yeah. But it was just like it's swelling. The music is swelling again. It hasn't stopped swelling. But then when you get to the Trinity sequence, like what's so great about it is they just cut the sound.
Yeah.
And so you have and the kind of camera work on the bomb and what it looks like, that explosion,
That actually was good. I
really
wondered a
compelling.
lot of the movie. I thought, why did this win best cinematography? It's just a bunch of people sitting around in a room in a vaguely sepia tone, but not really. I'm like, this is not. If this was being done without digital film, it would have been really impressive.
I think it
Like
was done without digital film.
oh maybe oh then
It's
that's a little more
printed, yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, he doesn't
Oh, okay.
do he Nolan
Oh, then
refuses to do
okay,
digital, yeah.
fine. Oh, then okay, that's why it wins. Okay, fine. Then that actually is really impressive. I totally take that back. Oh, I didn't know that. That's then it is really good cinematography. Fine. I just thought I'm like, this is so easy to do. This is the problem we had with Ben-Hur. It's like nowadays when I see that kind of stuff, I'm like, that's not impressive anymore. Oh, Brother, Where Art Thou did that. That's where I think Brother whereas like, the first like where they just did digital film because they did all that stuff on it. And it's that was really cool then. Nowadays, everybody does it. You can slide those filters all you want. So it's not hard to do with digital film. So I just kind of found the overall thing. Oh, now that I know that, that's kind of. And then I saw those sequences. I thought, oh, the bomb sequences are really good. A lot of those are really cool. Now that I know it's not digital film, then yeah, fine. That's why it wins. And then that is really impressive.
Yeah, and I mean, regardless of digital or not, it's the sequence is well paced. It is well
No,
paced.
I was just talking cinematography.
Just in
Sorry,
terms of, oh
I
yeah.
was just cinematography. I was the only reason I thought, oh, it wins cinematography because of these bomb shots. They're really beautiful. It's really impressive how well those are done. That's what I thought. Anyway, back to the pacing.
Yeah, but I think it is it slows down and then when it goes off, everything goes quiet and then you hear his voice with the pages of, that weird porn scene actually starts to make sense and
I
in the
mean,
context and
I knew that that was what he said later
yeah.
on that he thought. I think I mentioned it in the book too. I only know it because of the Trinity Infocom game, the text adventure game back in the day.
No, I don't know
Uh,
that. Do
oh,
you
it's great.
you have to set
Yeah,
off the bomb or
you have
stop it?
to. It's so
Do you
this
have
is
to
I
design
actually
it?
so it's Infocom. Like it's these text adventure games. I loved them as a kid. We didn't really have a computer. We had this like really old Mac computer that was you could only load one disk at a time and it didn't have a hard drive. It was like all this kind of but so the only thing you could play on with these text adventure games. I used to play them a lot. And yeah, the Trinity one is it's more the idea is you get sucked into this sort of like mushroom world. It's kind of this Alice in Wonderland mushroom world. There's all these mushrooms
Oh,
everywhere.
you told me about
Yeah,
this.
and the idea is each mushroom in this world represents the explosion of a nuclear bomb. And if you can go into each of the mushrooms and you can go into the spot right before the bomb goes off. So you have to go into like different worlds to get different stuff. And then the goal of it is to get to Los Alamos, and you have to tinker with the bomb so that it doesn't basically ignite the atmosphere and destroy all that.
Oh, okay.
So you actually have to like tinker with it in order to get it to not do
Mhm.
that. And that's essentially the plot of the game.
Oh.
So it's, and it's just like it's a fun game, but they do make a specific reference to the fact that Oppenheimer, he said that was the thought that entered into his head when he saw the bomb goes off, was now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah, and he mentioned, yeah, I mean, he said that a lot in documentaries and
yeah.
things like that. He knew a good line when he had one. Though the thing that made me laugh too in that sequence was when the chance of the atmosphere igniting,
Yeah.
and he's talking to General Groves about that, and he's like, "It's a
What do they mean by
near
that? Yeah.
zero chance that it's going to happen. What would you want? A
Zero.
zero
Yeah,
chance."
zero. Like, that's the answer.
Yeah, but that sequence is worth it. Is worth watching. And I am hope, as you were saying before, I am hopeful that this kind of brings back the old-fashioned blockbuster.
Yeah, this is
It's
big. It was
not a
cool. It was fun.
yeah,
I didn't
and
think that.
he
Yeah.
yeah, I mean he did it with Tenet too. Tenet was I think released in 2021 and only in theaters, so you actually had to go to the theater and see it. Tenet is also unfortunately a much worse movie than this.
Yeah, I still, if I had paid my $10 and I was sitting in the theater and I had my popcorn, I might have been know at the length, but I had my popcorn and I'd be content. Like I would leave and go, fine, got my $10 worth, or I don't
yeah,
think the movies cost $10 anymore. I think they cost like 20, but you get my point.
yeah.
I'd have felt like I got my popcorn and my money and I'd gotten my thing out of it and I would have left. Whereas so many movies, they don't bother to do that. They're there for like 2 weeks and then they're suddenly showing up streaming.
Mhm. Yeah, and this is his effort, and this is him. This is Nolan, and he should get some credit for this. He wanted to keep the blockbuster alive. He wanted
Yeah.
that old-fashioned thing to continue, and I don't know that that's going to be the case. I mean, it doesn't seem based
No, I don't think
upon
that's where we're going. I don't
that
think
is
it's where
not
we're
where we're
going.
going, but I think we're going to keep a vestige of it. I think you're going to see this type of thing now and then. One or two or three movies. I think it's going to be like the late fall, early winter is when people go to the movie theaters because it's when you put up your Oscar movies. And if you want to win an Oscar in the future, you want it to be prestigious. So that means not streaming, that means theaters.
Didn't the Apple movie win
The
the
Apple
Oscar
movie
years ago?
did win, yeah, it won 2 or 3 years ago, whenever
Yeah,
it
a few years
was.
ago, yeah.
Yeah, but that's my hope. My hope is that the theaters compete with those streaming services, and the Oscars might be a vehicle for that. I don't have a tremendous amount of hope, but it could potentially be a way that happens.
Well, we have finished these
Yes, we
the
finished the best movies
finished
of
the
the
best
last
movies.
100 years, almost
There were some
100
good
years.
ones. There were some good ones in there, but
There were some good ones, yeah. I think I've concluded from this that the Oscars aren't very good at finding good movies.
I think they either, I mean, again, I think earlier, very early on, they seem to have done a better job of picking the sort of best movie of that year. And that often just meant the most popular, but it does seem to have had that. I think nowadays they tend to pick the movie that they think you should watch, not that they're using it more as like a signaling device
It's
of,
your medicine. This movie
yeah,
is your medicine. You need to
yeah,
take it.
this is what we should all be watching. And there's this sense of not recognition, but sort of and I can't where did I there was some award recently. It might have been one of the Nobel Prizes or something saying something like this, but I can't remember where I saw it with a Pulitzer or somebody who said, yeah, we're not so much here to recognize the great, but to use our award to affect change in the world. It
Ugh.
was like, that's not really what you are there for, though. You're not there. You're there
Yeah.
to recognize what is great, not to try to change and make value. I mean, you are there to make value judgments, but not there to make value judgments on what should be made in the future. I guess you are inherently. but there's this sense of that's
There's a
not really what you should
difference.
be doing.
There's a
And I
difference between highlighting aesthetics as a good unto itself and thinking of aesthetics as a player in the greater purpose, which is ethical refinement. And I think that these awards are that awards like the Nobel Prize or the Oscars or the Pulitzer, what have you, should be ethics, not excuse me, aesthetics are a good unto themselves. They're good for people to search for greatness in beauty. And you don't need it. It can, but you don't need it to help you with ethics. You can do that independently of great works of art. Great works of art can actually be simply beautiful or simply disturbing or something like that. I don't think there's a great deal of ethical training I get out of Macbeth. I already know I'm not supposed to kill someone for power. I don't need Macbeth to do that. But you appreciate Macbeth for like the stunning vision of nihilism that it has. Like I don't think I've ever read anything that approaches that kind of vision of nihilism. And being
I'm actually a proponent of the sort of view that in order to view great art, you almost have to have already a developed sense of ethics because great art can actually lead you in a wrong direction. It can lead you into,
you're a Platonist, then is
yes. I think there's this notion that if you sort of aren't practiced sort of in a sense of sort of virtues that you can go and watch, you can see a great thing of beauty and it can lead you to either injustice or it can lead you to integrity. I think it can actually go the wrong direction if you encounter those kind of things. It can create an ecstatic sense. And I think that beauty is a good in and of itself. And it is worth rewarding
yeah, it's worth rewarding
and
regardless.
recognizing.
Yeah. I still struggle with, and I know this is a point where we disagree. I struggle with the idea of an appreciation of the beautiful as making you a better person. I have trouble with that.
I'm not
Um,
necessarily certain that I would agree with
oh,
that.
okay. Hmm.
No, I don't think I would agree with that. I think it's in some ways it's the other way around. I think that seeing the beautiful is a goal in and of itself, but I think that it's not that it makes you a better person, it's you have to be a good person in the first place.
In order to see the beautiful.
It's not to see the beautiful, it's so that the beautiful doesn't often lead you in the wrong direction.
Hmm. Okay.
I guess it's like beauty, this beauty is truth and truth is beauty. But it's this idea that, you can see things that are true and they can lead you in the wrong direction. You can use them to justify bad things if you don't have an appreciation for what is good. Darwinism is a great choice. We can look at Darwinism and say Darwinism is true, but if you follow it in the wrong direction, it can lead you to social Darwinism. It can lead you to Nietzscheanism. It can lead you to eugenics. You can follow it. You can follow a true idea down very dark paths if you don't have the proper virtues to sort of serve as guardrails. I think beauty can work in a similar way. Beauty can lead people into very nihilistic, bad, nihilism is an example, but nihilistic bad directions if you see beautiful things and they become an end in and of themselves and you don't have guardrails. In the same way that truth can serve as that.
Hmm.
People who pursue truth to the detriment of all other things can lead to problems. It's the same people who pursue justice with no regards to mercy or wisdom or other things. They can lead you down to really bad paths.
Hmm.
And I think the same thing can be true of beauty. I think you can turn it in to inwards, to outwards, to derivative, to just literally. I think it can become a source of a problem.
Hmm.
So I don't
If
think that
it's
it's true
true.
that I don't think that it's true that seeing beautiful things makes you a better person per se. I think it is an end in and of itself, in the same way that truth is an end in and of itself, but without other virtues and without other practiced things, it can be a problem.
Yeah. Yeah, if you don't have any kind of if you have no ethical philosophy or are in pursuit of ethical improvement, that in itself is a problem, even if you're not pursuing beauty. Like anything is going to lead you astray at
Anything,
that point.
yes.
Yeah. So it
But beauty, I think, but beauty is good. and you can anything can be, but think people who pursue a good with no regards to other values get really bad.
Yeah.
Um, this is actually a point they make in the Lord of the Rings, actually, that yeah, I think Gandalf, sort of there's some reference. I don't think it's actually in Lord of the Rings. It's something that Tolkien wrote about outside of it. But he says that if Gandalf had actually tried to use the ring, he would have been even worse than Sauron, because Gandalf would have sort of been so self-righteous, and he would have been pursuing justice and good things, but he would have been doing it in such a horrible way that he would have been even worse than Sauron.
I think they
There's this
mentioned that
sense that,
about Galadriel too, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
there's this sense that people who pursue good things without regards to other good things can be even worse than just doing a bad thing. There's this sense of it. So that's, I guess we're getting really off topic here, but that's just what I think of beauty.
Yeah,
Anyway,
no, I think that makes sense.
I
I
think
think they're
I think beauty is worth pursuing in its own right,
right.
and I think that films can be beautiful, and I think they're worth pursuing. Good, beautifully made pieces of work as individual craftsmanship and beautiful things being made. And I don't know that that's what the best picture actually recognizes as.
No, and they're sort of limited by time. The dimension of time is needed to establish something as being beautiful. So that they do have that limitation that they can't overcome because they have to do this every year. But I do think in terms of does it have a greater function outside of being beautiful? That is probably a big problem with contemporary awards. I don't think that was always a problem. I think people were just like we're perfectly fine finding the best of something and acknowledging it as such. And I think this is, you know, something of a I don't know if it's a dangerous tendency, but it's a disappointing tendency to see beauty as being kind of stripped of its primacy in this process of recognition.
Mhm. I would agree.
Yeah. All right.
Shakespeare next season?
Shakespeare next season. Yeah. So join us next season, season 4, when we discuss Shakespeare adaptations. I don't know what we're doing first, so I'm not going to tell you because I don't know. By the time you're hearing this, I will know, so you could ask future me. But we're going to be looking at a few Shakespeare adaptations through the years. I think we'll be seeing silent Shakespeare. We'll be seeing some very weird Shakespeare. We'll be seeing Orson Welles Shakespeare probably more than once. We'll certainly see Kenneth Branagh, our own Niels Bohr.
Maybe that's how we should do. I was actually thinking that. I was like, we could lead from this, and we could be like, we got Brandon. Maybe we should, like, every movie we do, we need to do like a degree from the last movie.
Okay, so we'll be doing Henry V, Kenneth Branagh as Henry V, um, as our next film as we start off with a bang, our Shakespeare adaptations. This will be very exciting. I hope you join us, and I appreciate you guys this season. Thanks for listening. You can rate and review this show anywhere fine podcasts are available. For those viewing in YouTube land, if you haven't already, please like this video, subscribe to the Talking Studios channel for all our exciting content, and follow us on social media at Talking Studios. Check out other shows by Talking Studios, including Talking Pictures Trivia, where we explore movies through trivia, Keep Making Movies, where we explore micro-budget films, Limited Lexicon, where we play through text-based adventure games, and Get the Point, where we slowly reveal a movie poster and try to guess which movie poster it is. Got a question for us? Call the Talking Studios hotline at 201-467-8679 and leave a message. It may be featured on a future episode. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to Adapt It, wherever fine podcasts are found. If you enjoyed Oppenheimer and are looking for more adaptations of the life of J. Robert Oppenheimer, check out Fat Man and Little Boy, The American Experience, episode titled The Trials of J. Robert Oppenheimer, Oppenheimer versus Heisenberg, Pandora's Box, and Oppenheimer, the decision to drop the bomb.
Wow, talking studios.